Hey, 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 everyone!
And welcome back to Becca's Book Club Adventure. She's Becca.
He's Matt.
And thanks for tuning in to yet another episode as we escape reality
and unpack the fantastical chaos of Crescent City.
This time, I feel like when we did the first 7 chapters and it left off in the cliffhanger, we were like, okay, it finally got good, right? It finally got good. And then when we did the next chunk of whatever, it was like, okay, we're getting the murder mystery and it's getting interesting. But I feel like this time everything's sped up and I'm actually starting to understand the characters in the world.
Yes, we're definitely getting a lot more character development, a lot of plot development. It's sped up so much to the point where I texted Matt later in the week and I was like, this is how I know I read for vibes and vibes alone. I'm starting to get lost. But also I think that's the way she intentionally writes her books and part of the fun.
I think we have a lot to unpack with this section, and but I think we need to take a nod to today's sponsor before we get into it.
Ah, yes, today's sponsor. Well, today's episode is brought to you by Couch Comas. Couch comas, because nothing hits harder than that sleepy, cozy couch coma at the end of the evening. Until you actually go to bed, of course. Then your heart races, spiraling down a rabbit hole becomes your newest obsession, and suddenly you're mentally replying to that email you got 3 days ago. Goes great with tossing and turning, ceiling staring contests, and the quiet hum of unresolved trauma. Side effects may include overthinking, inexplicable anxiety, persistent fatigue, night sweats, and a cheerful demeanor at work. Recommended dosage is at least 4 nights a week, but always consult your physician.
Let's get into it. This week, we read chapters 21 through 37 of House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas, and there's so much to talk about. I think we should just do a quick recap of what happened, and then we can dive into all the questions we have.
Perfect, because I'm pretty sure I need the recap just as much as our listeners do. All right, so Bryce and Hunt delve a little deeper into the investigation of Maximus Turton's murder.
Sure. Not to mention that the murderer strikes again twice during their investigation. Once to kill an acolyte from Luna's temple, and the second time to kill a guard from Luna's temple. And it's found that both were working or were on duty the night the horn was stolen.
And during their investigation, they uncover connections to the stolen Horn of Luna, a powerful artifact once wielded by the first starborn prince, Pallas.
They learn that the Kristallos demon, who is responsible for all the killings, was historically bred to track the horn, suggesting that someone is attempting to locate and possibly repair it.
And we take a turn back to the White Raven, which is destroyed by a bomb, which is very much in line with Philip Briggs, the original suspect in Danica and the Pack's murders.
Hunt and Bryce get to interview Philip Briggs and determine that he and his followers are not responsible for the bombing.
And their inquiries lead them to the Oracle, where they might be able to find out some answers to the horn. She tells Hunt that someone wants to find the horn in order to open the doorway between worlds, which was previously only thought to close the doorway, but now it can open and close.
And the Oracle warns Hunt to keep his distance from Bryce, hinting at ominous consequences.
Dun, dun, dun. Throughout this journey, Bryce confronts painful memories, including significant fallout with her brother, Rune, and the traumatic aftermath of Danica's death.
And we learn more of Hunt's backstory and trauma after the fallout of the failed rebellion that he helped lead.
Amidst the tension, Bryce and Hunt's partnership starts to evolve, revealing layers of trust, vulnerability, and mutual respect.
And the section leaves off with a cliffhanger. The video footage of the temple the night the horn was stolen was always a dead end because of the blackout. But thanks to Declan, one of Rune's best friends, they found out that the footage was swapped with a different part of the city.
And the only person with clearance to do that was Danica's mother, Sabine.
I think there's a lot to talk about, but as ever, we have to ask the ubiquitous question. Becca, what's the vibe check at this point?
If we weren't reading this together intentionally, I probably would have read the next section on Sunday, because we're getting to that point where there's so much plot and so much development that I just need to devour it.
See, okay, you say you would have read the next section. If we weren't reading this together, I'd be done with the book.
Yeah.
I'm here for this. It is everything about this screams really popular television shows from when we were teenagers. Like this is some version of like Law and Order or Castle or The Mentalist, or it's like a crime like a murder mystery crime TV show where you have like a professional and um, a civilian who falls in love, and like it's so
I would say
it's the
it's like
thing with
Brooklyn Nine-Nine, except it's not, because Brooklyn Nine-Nine is totally a comedy, but it's that kind of feel of like, now the characters are home. We're kind of getting a lot more into the murder mystery of the plot, but it's that very ubiquitous experience of a murder mystery plotline.
yes, it's very comforting in its familiarity with how it's structured, but I have no idea what's going to happen, and that's great. Okay, let's dive into some questions here. So I think the first thing that comes to my mind is all of the warning signs and ominous portents about Bryce. So um so there's like three things we could talk about. But like the first is there's a big flashback in here about Bryce and Danica like surviving like a motorcycle crash or something, and
Yeah.
them being put on their knees to be like executed by some dudes that are pissed off at them, and Bryce just says like, Danica, close your eyes. And like that's the flashback. We don't know what happens, but they're alive. So something
Right.
happened.
And right before that, Danica knew something was going to happen, because Danica said, I love you.
I think we get what? We get two concepts of the I love you. Right then and there in the flashback, and then literally the night Danica dies. They seem to be the only two times that she says I love you to Bryce that we at least are aware of. The writing kind of leads you to believe that Bryce saves them.
Yes.
But like, how does Bryce save them? Because everything we know about Bryce, from her inner monologue to the file that the 33rd has on them, is that she has no power that's worth talking about.
Yep. Like maybe some super strength when she's really emotional, but nothing consistent.
And on top of that, the Oracle apparently freaks out about this chick. After the Oracle tells Hunt to keep his distance, Hunt then goes and tracks Bryce down and like asks her about it, which I was actually really surprised that he just blatantly asked her about it. I think it's like somebody went to therapy and got in on conversation 101. It was fantastic.
Right? I expected him to go back to the Legion 33 or whatever it is he works for and ask them about what they knew about that meeting.
And then give him false information, and then he and Bryce get into a big blow up over it, because
Yep.
like every TV show, we can't talk to each other. That would be too easy.
That would get rid of all of the drama.
Bryce essentially tells him that the Oracle never told her anything. The Oracle just like saw her, looked into her orb or whatever, and started screaming.
Which sounds absolutely terrifying, because the Oracle is described as being a sphinx. So they're part lion, they've got these wings, the head of a human, and they're screaming. And I think they even mentioned like all the lights go out because she's screaming so loud.
Once again, Bryce doesn't have any power on paper.
To the extent of our knowledge currently. Dun dun dun.
So, like, I think it's very clear. I don't like. Obviously, we don't know because we haven't read, but I think it's pretty obvious. Girls got something going on. It's on the
And in
DL.
that right, and in that moment, that's also when her and Rune's relationship changed significantly because they were kind of buddy buddy up until that point, like getting along as brother and sister. He was kind of defending her to Dad, and then that's when they go stone cold silent and stop talking to each other.
So you know how last time we were talking, and because Rune has the shadow walking capabilities, I kind of postulated that Bryce was going to get some type of firepower, and you were like, well, she's got the red hairs. It's like an omen. Um, I'm now wondering. Okay, this would like this segues into the other thing I want to talk about, which is the Horn of Luna. But like, so we learned that the Horn of Luna is broken, but can only be repaired and used or whatever by the Starborn star power. Okay, so that seems like a pretty obvious portent of how the world can be saved. And given that Rune has like it's cute amount of star power, like I'm starting to wonder instead of Bryce having fire like her dad, does she have this starborn starlight power stuff?
That's a good point because we don't really know which side that comes from, whether it's mom or dad. We know that the shadows are mom, and we know that the firepower Rune doesn't have is from dad.
We also learned by the by that all of the like electricity in Crescent City is powered by people's all of the magical creatures like light emissions or whatever when they make the drop into immortality. I don't dude, the logistics of how you capture that and like make it actionable blows my mind. But I'm wondering if is that essentially what starlight or star power or whatever we call that is?
If that's the case, wouldn't he be able to provide more power to the city?
That's true.
But I love the flashback that, or like the inner monologue that Bryce has in the one moment where she's talking about all these people she knows who's made the drops and wondering, is that the power that makes her toaster work in the morning? And you're like, oh, you are spiraling deep into your thoughts there, friend. That should have been like a first chapter thing we learned, not a trauma response thing we learned.
Mm-hmm. And it like so now you gotta wonder like how does it work from like a governing perspective? Because Crescent City is a city within another region. Because it seems like the world is like carved up into like 8 different areas that 8 different archangels rule, or something like that. So is this like First Light? I think that's what it's called. I think it's called First Light. Um, is there like a grid, sort of like AEP in the United States? And if that's the case, is there a different grid for every area, or are there different grids for like municipalities and the areas? Like it's just I'm really trying to think of the logistics of this, and it doesn't make any sense to me.
And if you get to pick when you drop, that means you get to pick when you're providing power to the city. So that feels like something that in this government structure that we have where things are pretty tightly controlled doesn't seem like something they'd give free will over to the people.
No, they would need to have like projections of how much power they have over the course of time. And would this be like World War II, where you're only allowed to use electricity during X and X hours to conserve things? Like, do they just have an unlimited amount of first light?
Or is once it captured, is it maybe slightly renewable and therefore not as like a fossil fuel that depletes quickly?
It's like the ultimate solar power.
That would defy physics, but we don't necessarily have to have physics in a fantasy novel.
I think if we actually lived in a fantasy, there wouldn't be any science. Everything would just be, and we'd all be happy.
Right. Actually, a lot of fantasy books will tell you no one would be happy. There's a lot of war and disruption in fantasy novels.
That's true. 10 points to Becca. Okay, so let's keep going with the horn. Rune's father, the Autumn King, was so super interested in studying the way that light travels, and we learn that the only way to repair the Horn of Luna, is by, quote, light that is not light, magic that is not magic.
Or so the Fae stories tell us.
Yes. And I'm wondering, is that the Starborn power?
That would
And
make sense.
and if it's not magic, if it's magic that is not magic, does that mean that it's not detectable, it's not measurable? And is that why Bryce doesn't have any power on paper?
Oh, dun dun dun. I like this theory.
And then if we also circle back to the concept of people talking is just too easy, it makes sense that the Autumn King knows all of this, but he can't be bothered to tell Rune, the only person with this power that anybody knows exists, and therefore the only person that could potentially repair the horn. Like, what does the Autumn King know? That's what I want to know.
Right? Because he wants the horn back in his possession, but I don't necessarily get the sense that he wants to use the horn. I get the sense that he wants to make sure no one else does, because he's already king of the castle. Probably wants to stay that way.
Probably. The Horn of Luna, because it's broken and needs repaired, and the Autumn King sends Rune off to find it because, quote, like calls to like, whatever, right? It makes me think of ACOTAR and the Cauldron, because Feyre was able to sense it because like calls to like, but she also had to repair it by reattaching the feet, which is a little bit more simple. So I'm wondering, are they the same thing? Like, because we have the Maas verse and everything, are they two pieces of the same concept?
I would be inclined to say yes.
If you're inclined to say yes, how about this one? In Throne of Glass, the word keys help form a word gate, which is a doorway between worlds. And the Horn of Luna is able to open and close the doorway between worlds. So is the Horn of Luna a word key?
I really like that, and I pray to God that those scary spiders don't come through into Crescent City.
um,
But that also provides an opportunity for these universes to align, like is suspected in some of the novels that go on. Can you imagine Aelin, Bryce, Feyre sitting down together?
yes. I think that would be the ultimate episode of Sex and the City.
Yeah, but instead of discussing their recent triumphs in the bedroom, they're probably discussing which kingdom they just took, and then
Whose
getting to
knives
the
are
sex.
sharper?
But then would it really be Feyre or would it be Nesta?
I think Nesta's the fourth. Just Feyre and her sisters go hang out with Bryce and Aelin. So I was about to say Selena.
I think Elaine would be bored as shit and would leave quite quickly.
If the Lorn of, if I keep saying the Horn of Luna is essentially a word key, and it is the the tropey artifact that's going to save the world. I'm going to go ahead and compare it to the word keys, insofar as, if you really think about it, the word keys didn't do crap in the way in which Aelin utilized them. Spoiler alerts for anybody that's listening.
Hated that scene.
Yeah, well, I hated it because I felt like it was a little bit of a letdown based after all the buildup. A little bit of revisiting this concept of what happens is we, the readers, are led to believe for books and books and books that if the word keys are used to like seal the gate or whatever, Erewhon is going to be thrown back into the realm from whence he came. Obviously, that doesn't happen, but either way, lest we forget, there be a big ass army of people that want to kill you that are still on the earth even after the word keys are used. So I have to ask, I want to like postulate a little bit with the horn of Luna. If it is, I'm assuming you blow it. So if it's blown and the doorway between worlds is closed, what does that mean? Does that do anything in and of itself? Like what has to happen with the world as it is already in Crescent City to actually resolve whatever conflict is going on? Because if you just
I'm just
close the
not starting to
doorway,
process. Yeah.
if you close the doorway, the
I didn't
Kristallos is already here.
Right. I didn't think about the fact that we actually were probably trying to close it, not open it. Because I thought we were trying to open it. But yeah, we're trying to get rid of this demon that's going around murdering people.
I'm sure there are lesser demons too, since Hunt has been dispatching them forever. But also, there's a huge rebellion going on. Like, are we going to learn that this rebellion is being fueled by the demons? Like, how does blowing the horn of Luna bring peace to Crescent City and resolve the conflict we've been given? Unless blowing the horn also magically throws the Kristallos through the doorway at the same time, which
See, but the way that comes across to me is the way is a war horn to start the war, right? When you think of not taps being played, but the announcement that the army is there,
like
right? That's what I think of.
charge. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess if we're speaking of the Kristallos, for a second. Okay, if the word if the Lorn if the Lorn of Luna, right? If the horn of Luna is the same thing as the word keys, I'm wondering if the demons in Crescent City are the same thing as the Valg in Throne of Glass. Is it the exact same stuff that we're just having different names to because we're in a different realm, as it were?
I could see that being a possibility. Interestingly enough, so I finished my graphic audiobook today for Iron Flame, and at the end of it, to advertise, right, they have the Crescent City in it. And the scene that they have as like the little intro clip to get you to buy the graphic audiobook is the original run-in with the Kristallos. And so that
Was
was
that
kind of
good?
interesting to hear it from that perspective. It was definitely good. I was going to click it off because I was like, what's the point? I'm reading the book right now. And then I was like, oh, this is actually really interesting to hear it from this side and also very helpful to hear it again.
Okay, so we sort of kind of connected the Horn of Luna with the word keys with the Cauldron. So all three universes. Okay, so let me pose this question to you. In Throne of Glass, Aelin uses the word keys to lock the door between all of the worlds, all of the realms, right? When does that happen? Uh, I don't know if there's an answer to this, but like when does that happen on the timeline of Crescent City? Like with the book we're reading right now, has Aelin done that yet in her universe? Because you have to wonder if Aelin used the word keys to close all of the travel between realms, how can the Horn of Luna be useful? I'm trying to connect all these metaphysical dots.
Right? Because when we think of the Throne of Glass and the setting that we're in, it sounds much more medieval of the three of the options, right? And the Crescent City is by far the most modern, which then inevitably puts a court of thorn and roses in the middle ish.
Ish.
So, like, timeline wise, I would have thought the word keys were used by the time Crescent City comes around. But you're right. If we've already sealed off the world one, is this maybe a fourth word key that wasn't found? Or
It can't be that. If it's a fourth one, then the ones that Aelin used wouldn't have done the job. It wouldn't have locked everything.
But that dreamscape scene, there's just still part of me that doesn't believe she used them. Because what we thought was going to happen didn't happen. Or at least not in the way I was led to believe it would happen.
I think it happened. But it definitely didn't happen in the way we thought it happened. Something that you said strikes my. You mentioned ACOTAR coming before Throne of Glass, coming before Crescent City. What if they're all happening at the same time? Like if we're talking about like string theory, right?
Like
So
a
it's not in the
Star
same
Wars, different
world.
planets.
Yeah, that kind of a thing.
Then that makes it make more sense. And that also goes along with the Throne of Glass theory, where there are all those different worlds that the Valg came from in the first place, right? So maybe this is one of those worlds and it's not yet closed off. And this is one of the original word keys that hasn't yet made its way into Throne of Glass plotline.
So is it like a super word key? So like Aelin locks everything, but the horn of Luna is like it can like supersede everything and unlock what she locked.
Right? Or is it more akin to like the Eye of Elena?
Or do the word keys only have any manifestation in the Throne of Glass world? Like she didn't lock all the realms, she only locked hers to go in and out of hers.
Yeah. So maybe there are a bunch more and it just took 3 to lock down the Throne of Glass world.
Interesting. Okay.
Well, and the Cauldron, I think, is described as having 3 legs, isn't it? So is there 2 more objects we're going to get introduced to in Crescent City?
Ooh, that's smart. That's really smart. That's really, really freaking smart. Well, we
Well,
already have okay. We have two, sort of, kind of, maybe. We have the horn, and then we have this sword that Rune
oh,
has. That is,
yes.
yeah, the King Arthur pulling the sword out of the stone, essentially, right? Only the Starborn can do that. So we have those two. Is there anything that we've read that could potentially be the third? What about what about this one doesn't have any link to the star power though. But okay. Sabine is still super pissy about not having Danica's sword,
Yeah.
which by the way, we all know where the hell that sword is.
Right. In a closet. In the art
Griffin
gallery.
Antiquities. Yeah. I don't know why Bryce didn't just has nobody looked in that closet at all in the last 2 years since Danica died?
Right? Like, I kind of get why Bryce isn't handing it over out of spite, but like, she also doesn't make any remarks back to Sabine.
Yeah. Which, yeah, you can't really blame her there. Sabine's a twat.
No, but like a search and I was gonna say search and rescue. A warrant for searching the place, I'm surprised hasn't been issued.
Yeah. But what could this third object be? I'm convinced that the sword is going to have something to do with it because it's been connected to the Starborn, and the horn, is connected to the Starborn insofar as how it's used and how it can be repaired.
We also don't get, we got other objects later in A Court of Thorn and Roses in book 3, right? Of Mist and Fury. We got the like, she goes up into like the the Throne of Nightmares area, and she like retrieves the like dagger set, I
Oh,
think.
the dagger set. Yeah, and we also got that mirror.
The mirror, yeah. And then I think another object appears in the 5th book with Nesta. Or they identify one more that they need to go find and they didn't have.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, maybe the third object is forthcoming.
I think
Maybe
so.
Bryce is the third object.
She has that necklace, although it's described as being not common, but a
Everybody
purchasable
seems to
item.
know what it is. Yeah.
Yes.
I'll be honest. I feel like we just had like a quote deep conversation. Woo! But also the magic system of Crescent City is so ridiculous. I can't even begin to delve into it. I feel like I've had to distill it down to the things that are relevant to the plot.
Well, and she uses so many different character types, and they're all somewhat familiar character types, right? Like there's a lot of discussions of the vampire like vampire like beings, right? With the blood sucking and whatnot. And we have the demons, and so we have all these other different types of magical creatures that are familiar, and they're kind of described within this world, but not in great depth. And honestly, there's too many to keep track of.
No, you have to just kind of it's assumed that everybody knows. And then they throw just all the different salts at you and you're like, "Oh, yeah, of course, I'm going to remember that shit." Uh,
Right? So there's physical magic where you can kind of purchase and barter with it, magic that you have as a being or an entity that you're able to harness. And I'm guessing we're going to find out different ways that other magic can be used. I mean, it's electricity too,
it's electricity. Like who knows how Jessica does what Jessica does? Like is this like oh, I don't remember her name, but like the witch that lives in the woods and Brave?
Mhm. Yep.
Or is this like the wicked fairy godmother from the Shrek series? Or are we talking about Snow White's evil stepmother?
Well, and she's described as being a sorcerer, but came from witches. So that implies that there's differences in the type of magic that they wield or use.
Yeah, and I want to know more about Jessica because I want to know if she connects to um the witches in Throne of Glass. Because I think the witches in Throne of Glass are super cool. And Manon's hot.
They're by far and large some of the most impressive beings. Okay, but enough with magic. Let's talk about some character relationships that are developing.
Let's
Because
do it.
Bryce and Hunt, there's something brewing.
Oh, there's definitely something brewing. Um, I think the number one thing I noticed is in um, all of the POVs from Hunt, he's starting to actually notice that Bryce is a snack.
Yeah, both physically and mentally.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's starting to catch on to the games that she plays and that she uses her party girl aesthetics for sure to get her through moments. And she does it to save him in one particular moment as well during this.
Which apparently nobody has treated him that way in the last like 200 years.
Right? So we have this big event that's coming up, and Hunt's backstory involves, he had his lover, and she had, I don't know if she was described as a twin or another sister, but a sister who's a spitting image of his lover, who was a hateful, hateful being. And after the sister went away, she's the one that imprisoned him and tortured him. Which has got to be quite the mind fuck, okay?
Yep. And she's the entire reason that Hunt is on this 24/7 Bryce protection duty, so he didn't have to be anywhere near the officials when she comes to town.
Right?
But
So
spoiler alert.
at some point he's like, oh my god, I need more t-shirts. We're gonna have to go back to the Legions so I can get some t-shirts. So they go back and she has fucking arrived already.
Yep.
They get off, I think they get off the elevator, or they're getting on to the elevator and run into her. And Bryce pulls a fast one. Bryce pulls out her camera. She starts taking selfies with the bitch and is like nudging Hunt along and like says something really paparazzi catty-ish, and like they split real quick.
It's like it's so aware. She's self-aware. She's around of her aware of her surroundings. She's on like fourth, fifth, sixth level thinking. It's like she's playing social chess. It's crazy.
Yeah. Meanwhile, he's like, frozen in fear, rightfully so, and she's pulling him along and gets them to escape quick enough that he does not have a meltdown in front of everyone.
I mean, I don't want to call it childhood trauma, but it's essentially childhood trauma
Yeah,
that
at
he doesn't know how to get out
220
of.
years old.
Uh-huh. And okay, what about the fact that Hunt goes from camping out on the rooftop across from Bryce's apartment to sleeping in the guest room?
Yeah, so this all feels interesting to me because I can't really decide, like, does this feel like forced proximity relationship? Does this feel like an organic growth to the relationship? I mean, I appreciate that he's not outside in the rain anymore and we're getting a little bit more of a social connection between them. But I don't know that it's I don't think mutual is the right word, but I think she does it out of convenience. Like, I don't think she pities him, and I don't think she wants him in there particularly, but it's just easier for all of them.
And she doesn't want Rune staying with her, which I
Oh,
guess
that's right.
was like the Autumn King was like, "Hey Rune, you need to keep tabs on this girl or whatever." And I don't remember the details, but essentially Rune was like gonna move in to watch her all the time, and Bryce was like, that's not happening.
Nope. So she chess pieced that moment too and said, "No, I already have one. His name is Hunt." And Hunt's like,
Yeah.
What?"
Sarah J. Maas does a lot to humanize Hunt over all of these chapters. Like he goes from the Umbra Mortis, who's just killing everything and everybody, to being this like hurt little puppy that Bryce needs to fix.
And Bryce is also a hurt little puppy that needs fixed.
Yeah, I mean, they be hurt for sure.
Because he's supported her in every single moment of her trauma flashbacks that she's had as well. And he's starting to actually sympathize and empathize and predict, right? Because, like, the last murder, he's like, "No, you shouldn't look. You're not going to look. Turn around."
Yeah, whereas the first murder, he was like, "You're looking, bitch."
Right?
Uh-huh. Um, okay, something you said, is it forced proximity or is it organic? Did when you were reading this, do you think it felt like the progression of their partnership or relationship or whatever we want to call it is happening organic? Do you feel like there's any like convenience of plot happening to just move it forward? How do you feel?
Mm, I feel like they're mutually using each other. I don't necessarily know that don't necessarily think I get full on romantic vibes from them yet. Like, we're getting little inklings of like, maybe this is what's going to happen. But I feel like it is a relationship of convenience for both of them at this point to avoid other scenarios.
I mean, we definitely get some moments where Hunt definitely has the hots for Bryce. I mean,
Yes.
for Christ's sake, he sees her in her hot lacy panties, which good for him. But also he has like a hardcore callback to Feyre, where like Bryce shoots a sniper rifle perfectly, just like Feyre shoots the bow perfectly, and everybody's like, "I love you so much."
All you have to do is be a killing machine, and all the boys will flock to your yard.
Yeah, it's the fantasy version of the milkshake. I think Sarah J. Maas is forcing the issue a little bit, but she's doing it in a way that it can all be explained away and be seen as organic. Um,
I'm
I get
enjoying the
the
relationship.
oh, I am too. I think the I think the I mean, it's definitely like Rowan and Selena when they first meet in their training, and they like agree to help each other out of the depressions that they're in.
Mm-hmm.
It gives me sort of those vibes because they're both hurt, like you said.
And it's not like Dorian vibes where there's just endless flirting to be had anyhow.
Oh man, Dorian. Oh, Dorian. Okay, I love Dorian, but that dude falls in love with the next girl that is in front of his eyes, like every time.
Yeah, the storyline that he was really upset about the nurse that was helping him really always irritated me because I was like, she literally just filled a void one night for a few nights in a row.
Mm-hmm. And then after she died and he was all hurt and everything, the next female that comes into his path is Manon. And like that's enough for him to fight the demon for a hot second to be like, hey, baby.
Well, maybe. Don't get me wrong, love the character, but his relationships are all a little forced.
Yeah, definitely. Um, the entire time I was reading Throne of Glass, I thought there was going to be this huge full circle moment when Aelin and Dorian kind of get back together at the end to have a full circle moment from the beginning. And it's also convenient because they are the two most powerful magic wielders, at least um, in their continent, and also they are the rulers of the two most powerful kingdoms on their continent, and it's how the story started, and everything about Kingdom of Ash was just full circle feel goods. Um,
Yeah.
but I didn't know how SJM was going to do that given Rowan.
And she didn't. She didn't give it to
Yeah,
us.
no, she didn't, and that's okay. And that's okay.
So I'm excited to see how their relationship continues to grow because I am deeply appreciating how they're starting to pick up on each other's notices or tells and save each other from terrible moments.
Yes, 100%. I I think we talked about this when we first talked about like why we like romantasy. Um, I like I like the fact that they're turned on by each other just physically because that's a real thing in the real world. But every time their relationship actually takes a step forward, it is out of some emotional moment or mutual understanding and respect and things like that. And that's real life. That's love.
Right? And that's why I think romantasy is so interesting as a genre in and of itself because life is full of partnerships and friendships and romantic relationships. So why would they ever be excluded in any normal storyline?
Mm-hmm. I think Sarah J. Maas does a really good job with these kind of plot arcs for the relationships. A lot of I think a lot of other romantasy writers really lean into like fated lovers tropes. And that's not to say that it's bad. I think it's just a little bit less relatable to what we go through.
None of the relationships feel as gimmicky as some of the other romantasy books that I've read.
I think that's a better way to put what I was thinking. Mm-hmm. Also, what she does makes any sort of event in like a war or death or injury or whatever just hit so much harder because we're also emotionally invested.
Yes.
It's not just like, oh no, fate, oh, nuts.
Right? Like the meeting of Briggs was a really interesting scene to walk through from Bryce's point of view because we we wanted Bryce to get angry, to yell, to be upset, but she doesn't because she's confused and like confounded in the moment and realizes that Briggs is not responsible for Danica's death. And they all kind of come to this agreement and the sad letdown that is, right? It's like you get to grieve that you actually don't know the end of the story yet.
It's also really sad when she doesn't act like that, right? Because she's still traumatized. She's still in shock. Like it almost hits harder for us than if she just gets all up in arms and wants to start swinging at this dude.
And I think that's something much more unique about Crescent City than the other novels. Like in Aylin's storyline in Throne of Glass, you definitely get the trauma, but you don't get any of the typical trauma response that people work on in therapy, right? But in Bryce's scenario, we're starting to see some of this freeze behavior that people who have been through traumatic events have, or this flight behavior that they have. And so it's really interesting to kind of see those themes actually play out for this character that has had a very traumatic experience.
Yeah. I would never have phrased it that way because I've always thought that Sarah J. Maas is one of the few authors I've ever read that actually acknowledges trauma. But like the way you put it, it's almost like when you're watching Feyre deal with it, when you're watching Selena deal with it, right? They have a very human response of just shutting down.
Mm-hmm.
And when you read that, it's they don't deal with it in some way, right? They just like Feyre sequesters herself and she'd be like, I'm gonna paint my feelings. And um Selena is just like, I just need to sleep for a week, which is all
All valid
real world
responses.
stuff. But Bryce, it's almost like you're getting all of that from Bryce, but instead of from a what is Bryce doing, it's almost like how is Bryce feeling and thinking, and it's like an emotional trauma. It's like a different way of writing the same thing, and I think it's is that just growth as an author?
Or maybe it's exploration of a much deeper theme of PTSD that Bryce has
Okay,
been through,
yeah,
which, not to discount what Aelin and Feyre have been through, but it feels like a much deeper exploration into that experience.
I think somewhere in here Bryce makes actual mention of like her mom or somebody kept trying to set her up with therapists and she
Yeah.
just wouldn't go. um I can relate with that so hard. Like, I'm sure all of us on some level know that we could all benefit from some form of therapy. Um, but having worked in the corporate world, having managed people, I have I have watched people go to like my employees go to therapy, and I don't know it at the time, but like they stop being able to do their jobs. They're dropping the ball, they're not able to communicate, all of these things. And when I like pull them in for one-on-ones to try to address it and be like, what's going on? You won like employee of the quarter 6 months ago. What gives? I always like it's happened 3 times now that I've gotten a story that therapy has diagnosed them with X, Y, and Z. The thing doesn't matter. We're all broken. Um, but then like the therapist breaks them down before being able to build them back up. And um, when they're being broken down, like they lose all of their coping mechanisms that make them able to live in the world and be productive humans, right? And that's not bad, but from a corporate standpoint, if it goes on for too long, from an HR perspective, it has to be addressed. Um,
I
and
think it's
anyways, my
interesting
my whole point. Okay.
the way that you say like a breaking down. I think is really interesting because I don't think therapy or therapists view it that way. I think of it more as a very intentional questioning and making you reckon with some of those moments that you've had and figuring out what is yours to take ownership of and what's not yours to have ownership of. And that process can be really tricky and make
Mhm.
you rethink a lot of different things that are going on, right? And so like that's why it applies a lot to the context of where they as an employee are maybe headed in that moment because they're realizing some of the different coping mechanisms weren't serving them, or they were serving them to get through in the moment, but they were later creating more problems for them.
Yes, maybe that's the more intelligent or PC way to put it. You know me, I often try to say things with the best intentions and it just comes out like hurtful sometimes. But I guess I say all of that to essentially say I'm slightly terrified of going to therapy and being told that I have X, Y, and Z stuff, and in the process of questioning and um, getting quote worse before I get better type of process, I just can't deal with the world and I stop being a functional human being. There's some part of me that would rather be broken but functional than non-functional but healing, if that makes sense. And I
It does.
I
Like, I
I
think
got
that's
that
why
a
people
lot
avoid
from
it,
Bryce. Mm,
right? Like, that's why she's avoiding it. That's why people in general avoid it. Therapy is really hard work.
yeah. Um, I know on the internet, Bryce seems to get a lot of flack for not dealing with her trauma. And I've always wondered why she gets the flack and Aelin and Feyre don't. And I'm guessing it's because Crescent City is like a modern world and people can actually relate to it. Whereas when you're living in like castles and stuff without technology, you just sort of assume that therapy's not a thing because back in the day, in our world, it wasn't, I guess. But I
Yeah, or
think
maybe it's just
it's,
deeper exploration.
yes. I don't understand why Bryce gets all the flack. I think it's very realistic.
I think it's also really easy for us to say, you need to go to therapy because you experienced a very traumatic death of your best friend. It's much harder to say, you need to go to therapy because you're a human that's existed in the world that's difficult and hard to be in. Because that feels a lot more broad of a conversation than an event, right? And so Bryce has a
Yeah.
major event, and Aelin and Feyre, like Feyre's childhood is fucked up. But I feel like so many
Yeah.
people have really messed up childhoods, and that gets brushed under the covers, and people just move forward with it without going to therapy. And so I think that's why people don't give Feyre flack for that kind of experience. And then also to your point of, are there therapists in magical lands?
All good questions. All good questions.
Ooh, I'm just getting excited to where we are going at this point. I know the next
Yes.
section is going to have a lot more plot lines. What do you think is going to happen in our next reading section? Do you think Bryce and Hunt will finally do it?
Dude, Bryce and Hunt have got to do something. Part of me thinks that they're going to have a blow up before they can reconcile and bone. But then part of me is just like, she's seeing him shirtless in her apartment and he like cracks the door and sees her bottom up in her panties while sleeping. And like, this has got to be sort of like a sitcom thing where it's just like they're going to bump uglies. It's going to happen.
Right? Like, not a one night stand kind of scenario, but a one night stand kind of scenario.
I think that the Bryce and Rune being cousins thing is going to be debunked in the next chunk. Okay, maybe not the exact set of chapters but we read, but like we're going on and we're going to be reading part 1 of section 3. I think that their relationship is going to be debunked in section 3. It's going to have to be.
By Hunt. I don't know that it'll be widely known, but I bet Hunt figures it out.
Yeah. Um somebody else is going to die
I think we'll
at
have
the
two murders.
Kristallos. I can't think of who they are though. The cliffhanger that we have with Sabine, I think that that's a red herring. I do think that there's probably some type of treachery in the wolf pack,
Yes.
but I'm guessing it's not Sabine.
Because there's got to be a reason why the sword is like stored in a closet with Bryce. Because it sounded like in that first iteration that was something that Danica would do on the regular, would just toss this sword into this closet. So why
Mm-hmm.
did Danica feel the need to keep it out of their house, out of her mom's grasps, any of that scenario?
Yeah. Speaking of all that, I think um, their investigation is not necessarily going to uncover who is summoning the Kristallos, but I think Bryce is going to learn a lot more about Danica. I think we're going to have like a Nehemia situation here where you have to be like, how much did you actually know your friend type of quandary? And we're going to learn a lot about Danica and what Danica knew, because Danica knew stuff.
And I think Fury comes back into this next section, and we get to learn a little bit more maybe about Fury and Danica's relationship.
Do you think Fury and Hunt go head to head in the next bit?
Or do we take a plot line twist and they actually work together for once?
Yeah, they could have like a come to Wyrd moment, as it were.
I'm excited. I can't wait.
Yeah. I guess that's going to do it for us today.
As always, you can let us know what you think. Leave us a review or email us at bookclubbybecca@gmail.com, or find us on Instagram at Becca's Book Club Adventure. All one word, all lowercase. And we might actually feature you on our next episode.
Speaking of our next episode, next time on Becca's Book Club Adventure, we'll be diving into chapters 38 through 52 of House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas.
So until next time, keep reading and good luck with your couch comas. Thanks for listening.
Bye.